Hello, and welcome back to the Carbon Capture Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Danielle Piekarski, and today we are joined by Matt Browell-Hook, Energy Transition Director at Spirit Energy. Matt, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to have you on today.
Thanks, Danielle. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for joining us. So, to start things off, could I have you share with our audience what you do in your role as Energy Transition Director at Spirit Energy?
Absolutely. So I sit on XCOM for Spirit Energy, and my responsibility really is twofold. One, we have a fantastic project in Morecambe Net Zero, which is a 25 million tonne per annum scale carbon transportation and storage opportunity in the UK. So I lead that project development where we are looking to start injection activities around 2030. And then I also work with our asset teams in terms of looking for, identifying and working with opportunities that aid our overall energy transition journey as Spirit Energy.
Thank you, Matt. So our focus today is going to be MNZ. Can you tell us what MNZ is and how you're getting on with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So MNZ is Morecambe Net Zero. So as Spirit Energy, we've been operating a number of fields in the East Irish Sea for about the last 40 years. So we've had single operatorship from first discovery. And those fields are gigantic gas reservoirs in the UK, and at one point represented about 20% of the daily demand of the UK. That was back at a time where the demand was higher. So actually, if you forecast through to today's usage, then we would be up at above 30%. But over time, those gas fields have depleted and are depleting, and we're now in late life operations. So the Morecambe Net Zero project, or MNZ, is an opportunity to repurpose the South Morecambe and North Morecambe depleted gas reservoirs into a carbon storage opportunity for the UK to help the UK meet its net zero goals. Those fields have the ability to store about 1 billion tonnes of CO2 over their lifetime. So these are very, very large fields, and we're ideally placed in the UK up in the region of the northwest. We have the Barrow gas terminal, which gives us access to the Port of Barrow for shipping solutions. And we have a partnership with the Peak cluster, which is a set of cement and lime manufacturing plants across the Peak district, where we have a pipeline solution that we are developing that will take the emissions from those cement and lime sites at the rate of up to about 4 million tonnes a year and pipe them directly to the offshore stores so that we can permanently and safely, securely store the CO2 in the reservoirs. It's a multi-year project. So we started working in earnest on this probably about 2 years ago. In reality, this has been a concept that's been around for over 10 years now. And as I say before, we're looking to inject around 2030 and operate these fields for over 40 years. For Spirit Energy, as our gas production declines and we work towards the cessation of production when the economic recovery of those fields is over, we'll then transition from an energy security gas producer into a carbon storage company.
Very interesting. So how would you say that CCS is developing as this project progresses and goes past track one?
The development of the carbon capture and storage industry is a fascinating case study in its own right. Essentially, it's gone from a number of failed projects in the UK over the past 25 years or so to a nascent industry that has accelerated its growth enormously over the last few years. So as the government selected two major projects, East Coast Cluster and HyNet, to be the Track 1 projects. So they are the first of a kind carbon storage projects. Then beyond that is something called Track 2, which is a project called Acorn in Scotland and Viking in the Humber. And then beyond that, it's about how can we move through a market transition phase to closer to a merchant model or a self-sustaining model and store CO2 at the scale required to meet the government targets of 50 million tonnes by 2050. And that's something that we see ourselves really keenly fitting into as we build from our original anchor case of around 4 million tonnes all the way up to 25 million tonnes. And so the industry is moving very quickly. The regulation and the government kind of contract methodology is progressing. It has suffered delays through that development process, but we are very keen that Track 1 gets away with hopefully FIDs in September. And we're working closely with the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, along with the North Sea Transition Authority, in executing the carbon storage licence that we were successful in getting in May 23, and also making sure that our project is hitting the government requirements for this new regulated industry, and something that we're excited about, and we absolutely see a path to the large-scale rapid rollout of carbon storage to meet those goals in that timeframe.
Okay, so you had mentioned fitting in the market. Where would you say that you fit in the overall space and time for the UK CCS industry as a whole?
So the government have set out targets. So they would like to achieve storage volumes of around 20 million tonnes by 2030. That increases to 2035 and then all the way up to 50 million tonnes. And the government's latest CCUS vision sets out how the market and how the industry will evolve. So where we're looking from 2030 to 2035, they've termed that as market transition phase. And the goal there is to store an additional 6 million tonnes year on year. If we look at Morecambe Net Zero as a project, we have the ability to certainly fill the first year of the 6 million tonne target in the market transition phase. But ultimately, beyond that, we can achieve storage rates of half of the UK's target goals by 2050 by around 2040. So we see ourselves as a key project in enabling those targets, not only enabling them, but beating them in terms of timing and how we can move forward, and having a project that has a really strong full value chain of emitters, transportation solutions and pipe solutions, as well as the opportunity to maximise the UK and European market for shipping. We see that as being a really great way of expanding all the parts of the industry and becoming the UK and potentially Europe's largest CO2 storage company in that process.
That's great. Okay. So how would you say that the carbon storage licensing interacts with the regulatory regime as you go through the development of the project?
We talked previously, the CCUS industry is a nascent industry, and it's a heavily regulated industry, but it's also new regulations and new approaches that we're all learning around. And so back in 2022, the North Sea Transition Authority launched bids for 21 carbon storage licenses, and we were successful in gaining ours for our East Irish Sea fields in May 2023. And the award of that license is around a 4-year journey where we have a number of phases from early risk assessment all the way through to project development and then into define or execute. And then the last stage or phase is really operations and into decommissioning. So it lasts for the life of the project. And so we're working really closely with the North Sea Transition Authority, and we're delighted to say that we've completed our early risk assessment phase, so the first phase of the project, which is a major milestone for us. And we've just completed our seismic survey of the area, which was another license commitment, which is a major undertaking for the store. But in the same vein as moving forward the carbon storage license, the goal of that is to get to a carbon storage permit. And in parallel, we need to get something called an economic license from Ofgem. And Ofgem will be the UK regulator for carbon storage, as well as getting ground leases and seabed leases from the Crown Estate, exploration and approval agreements as well, and then working with OPRED, the environmental agency, DCO, so the planning requirements for the onshore and offshore pipeline work that we required. There's about sort of 12 to 14 regulators heavily involved in this at different phases. And so we see that as being a real critical area of development over the next few years. These are new regulations or new areas for existing regulators to start to look after. And we're really keen to work closely as industry with the regulators to make sure that we've got a fit for purpose and an appropriate regulatory regime that allows us to move these projects forward at the pace that's defined by the government targets, and something that we're really very keen to do. And I have to say our interactions with the regulators have been hugely positive so far, and we've been really enjoying developing that process and that roadmap alongside the regulators, and sharing learnings across the projects has been great.
Absolutely. So I assume that you'll also be working very closely with individuals who are a part of emitters. How important are emitters to storage solutions?
I think this is the crux of all the exciting part of developing a nascent industry like carbon capture and storage. The term full value chain gets used a lot. And in that, really, what we're trying to describe is that a carbon store as a store alone essentially doesn't have a purpose or a value until you can put some carbon molecules into it. And so that full value chain of the capture projects at the emitter sites through to transportation solutions that get it to the store, and then ultimately the store company itself enacting that service is really important. And what we've got as Morecambe Net Zero with our partnership with the Peak Cluster is that full value chain that looks at each individual capture site, works together with them along with the transportation and pipeline providers and ourselves as the store provider, to ensure that we've got a fully optimized scheme. We can work with our customers, with our emitters, and see what works best, what's driving value through the project, what's ensuring that we're meeting the goals that we want. Because one of the key metrics we look at in developing the project is something called levelized cost of abatement, or LCOA as it's sometimes called. And that really looks at what's the pounds per tonne rate of the full capture, transport and storage. And so we're looking and working really hard with our customers to optimize the solution at all parts of the value chain to make sure that we can have the best possible project moving forward. So we believe emitters sit absolutely at the heart of all the carbon capture schemes, and they're critical to make sure that we've got the scale and the constructability we need to get this industry really moving at pace over the next 5 to 10 years.
For sure. All right, Matt. Well, we are coming near the end of our time here, but I did have one more question for you, and I just wanted you to share some of the opportunities that are being created by the developments we've highlighted here today.
I think CCUS has the ability to really unlock a huge amount of doors. We all know the imperative, urgent needs to get to net zero, both in the UK and globally. And so if you're a business that has emissions, then you are facing real challenges over the next 10 years and into the future, whether it be the cost of carbon credits, the societal rights to produce the product you're producing with the emissions, or even the lost business opportunity of not having a net zero product in a competitive market where they're available. And so by installing infrastructure in the UK, such as the transportation pipeline and the store that we will do through Morecambe Net Zero, we create a very attractive proposition to businesses that have emissions of where to site your business and how to connect to the scheme so that you can have that net zero future. You can store your carbon emissions safely and securely, and you can offer those net zero products to your customers, as well as critically and most importantly, stopping those emissions going into the atmosphere for the benefit of the planet. So we really see our project unlocking a huge amount of doors for us. We have opportunities around our Barrow site where we will have infrastructure in place that means that we've got great connection to the carbon store. We have the pipeline route itself from the cement industry where we can connect in on that route. And then the network exchange point, as we call it, where the beach crossing is to go offshore, again, creates another opportunity. So we really see CCUS as a massive industrial enabler for companies that are looking to get on with the net zero journey and future-proof their businesses for the next 50 years to come.
Again, we are joined today by Matt Browell-Hook, Energy Transition Director at Spirit Energy. Matt, thank you again for joining us today on the podcast. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you very much, Danielle. Thanks for your time and thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yes, so did I. And thank you to our listeners. If you or your company is interested in recording a podcast, please reach out. For more podcasts like this one, visit carboncapturemagazine.com and subscribe for industry news. We hope that you enjoyed this podcast and look forward to next time. Until then.